Good evening, and welcome to another installation of the Longhouse, the reactionary right-wing libertarian show, I suppose, with a bit of a Nordic slant. I hope you're all doing well tonight. This show was originally supposed to be covering the political history and state of Denmark in the same vein that we did the Norwegian stream as our first show. But unfortunately, some of our guests had to cancel due to some important real life situations. And that's stuff that happens sometimes. Luckily, we have some topics in the chamber ready to go. And I wanted to talk a bit about freedom in the modern world, so to speak, some musings that I've had lately on the topic. And I have my trusty co-host here, Luddic Path. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Walrus. So, good evening, everyone. Do we have many listeners? Yeah, I see
I see
someone in
some
the
activity
comments
in the
here. So,
chat. Yes.
yeah, it's fun. It's fun to be back on, and I was looking forward to learning more about Danish politics. But this is going to be a fun topic too. So,
Yes,
I'll
I
just
mean,
let you. Yeah.
I was looking forward to it as well, but it's something that's unfortunately going to have to wait. It's stuff happens, and then real life is always going to be more important than whatever we do here online, I think. Anyway, I'll just give people a moment to get into the chat. Good evening, everyone. How has your week been, Luddic? Do you have any comments or anything you want to chat about before we get into the meat?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a stressful week with work, so I'm not going to pay too much attention to current news things. I know there's stuff happening in the Ukraine. Norway has had the Taliban come in as visitors.
Oh yeah, we can do.
So that's an interesting topic. I guess we could talk about it. I don't really have any good takes. I've just listened to these sort of sourpuss media takes on it.
Yeah, I just want to, if nothing else, we can comment on sort of the clown world aesthetic of the Taliban coming to Norway, sitting across from these like very neoliberal politicians with their turbans and their long beards. It's been some funny imagery coming out of all of this, if nothing else.
Yes, maybe you could share something on the stream.
Yeah, if you give me a moment, I'll see if I can look up some images.
Yeah, I mean, reading up on these comments, you have like there seems to be a very consistent Norwegian sentiment, no matter if you're on the left or you move rightwards into the more allowable kind of Islamophobic spaces. And the narrative is basically that, well, this is a very bad thing and we should not we should not have them here, and they hate women and they're terrible in every way. But we don't have a choice. So nobody has really presented any coherent alternative to having them here, or okay, what should we have done instead? But everybody is unhappy about it. It seems everybody thinks that, yeah, well, Norway is super naive. We should not be respecting it. We shouldn't be engaging in dialogue. There we go.
Can I full screen this somehow? I just did a quick Google search. Can I full screen? Okay, nope, that didn't work. Boomer moment. Here we can see this is the gang showing up for the meeting. Let me see if I can pull up an article. It's probably in like current events if I just go to one of the newspapers, I suppose.
Yep.
Actually, here is something. 20 meetings in 3 days. Oh, some of this is incredible because they put them in like... Oh, I am sharing a tab. Sorry. This is very, very well streamed. See, can I translate this? Translate this page. to English. Thank you. And so you have, I think some of this imagery with like all of these Taliban guys in like a minivan is pretty funny. Here they are on the airplane arriving, and we have more imagery here. Nope, I have to
paywall. I don't want to give these people money.
Yeah, so. No, I don't want to either. So I was just going to stop it there. It's been, it's interesting. I guess the take in Norway has somewhat been like we have an opportunity to moderate the Taliban. In like, if they come to Norway and they see how I suppose our equality is working out, they'll go back and be less Islamic extremists or something.
Do you think anybody actually believes this at this point?
I don't think the Taliban believes it, which is like the most important. But, who believes this? Like, really?
They've gone through the war and they've gone through a
people.
Sort of westernizing effort from the United States gay empire for this long. They've resisted and clawed to it the entire time. So there's no reason to think.
What was it took them like 4 days or something?
Yeah, the Taliban retreat. There's been a lot of good streams on that one as well. Another thing that I'd like to point out, I saw a one of these newspaper articles that were talking about it. You have a lot of these Taliban guys on Twitter, and I don't have the handle right now, but they were commenting on that. They were responding to the sort of female Norwegian. I think she's the Minister of Foreign Affairs right now, and she has a Twitter account, and she just posts these sort of standard post BS sort of optics, politics stuff. And she's just getting trashed by the Taliban.
If nothing else, they're pretty good in like memetic warfare on the internet.
Yes, that is the modern guerrilla warfare, meme creation.
And I mean, in the end, the left can't meme, so they're doomed to fail, I suppose, against someone like Taliban. Without me sounding too in favor of Taliban, because I'll stress that I'm not necessarily the enemy of my enemy isn't necessarily my friend. Let me put it that way.
No, I can't go that far. I've seen that tendency with some people. I watched Nick Fuentes at one point. I think he was very sort of, well, we need to, the Taliban are like the good guys. I don't know.
Yeah, the only way I can see that being adopted is if you're like going super Nietzschean traditionalist, I suppose, and taking the like they want to destroy modern civilization and that's why they're the good guys. But even then, I don't think you're going to be able to make that fit into anything.
No, I just think it's funny to see the people who live in these alleged very modern countries having to deal with this seriously, because I assume in their heads they were done with this. They were at the end of history, and it's like this super progressive future we're going into, super equality, transhumanism, and it's just going to be great. And they have to then accept sitting next to the people in the turbans and the beards and negotiate that. Well, maybe you could open one school for a woman, maybe one,
maybe just a little bit feminism.
One female doctor, maybe one. So apparently, I read that in their interpretation of Islam, women can't go to male doctors, and if they go to male doctors, then the male has to be behind some sort of curtain, and that makes things difficult. So they have to go to female doctors, but because they don't have schools for women, then they don't have any female doctors. So it becomes like this interfamily clan-based treatment.
But that's what they want, though, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it kind
without
of is.
Being a scholar
it is interesting, at least, to see that they have, there are multiple progressive angles that the mainstream could have taken to this. And I imagine, if this was maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, they might have tried the tolerance angle, because you've seen a lot of that. Islam, it's not really, it's actually a very liberating religion, and it's very, it respects women in its own way, and we're not going to come here and tell them that they don't know, they don't know how to treat women because we're treating women like shit here. And there's none of that now.
And
It's
that
just
might be
dead.
true back then, but after the whole Afghanistan thing, I mean, you can't pull that anymore because the
Bring up
empire got
Lanner
so
95's comment.
pay no attention to the man. Yeah, that's pretty good. I'll pull it up for the stream. All right. Here, doctors have to be behind plexiglass. That's true.
Yes.
So we're progressing towards a more diverse nation in terms of like moving towards Islamic customs, in a sense. It's not a curtain, it's a plexiglass, but it's something. So we're becoming more diverse, guys. It's happening.
It's secular Islamism. Is that
Oh. Are you just a sip of water?
Yep.
Okay. So let us get into the main topic for now, and then I'm thinking we can do some chatting and AMA stuff afterwards if the chat has any questions for us. But first I will do my usual shilling. If you are not subscribed to this channel, I would implore you to do so. I've also linked a Telegram channel and the Matrix channel for the shielding server in the description. If it's not, I will update it soon. And in there you can get in contact with other like-minded Nords. And there's been some memes shared and some interesting chats already, but it's always fun with more friends around. So check that out if you haven't already. And with that, I think we should just get going. See here. Okay. So as I did with my stream about the conservatives and libertarians, I put together a couple of slides just to sort of organize my thoughts into something coherent, and maybe by the end of this, you will all have some understanding of what I'm trying to say. Luddick will help and be my co-pilot in a sense, and comment on anything he finds relevant, or any additional notes that he may take during the presentation.
Yep.
But I wanted to tackle the modern idea of freedom and what it means to be free. The subtitle I chose for this was a critique of the modern mythos. And asking, what does it mean to be free is certainly a deep philosophical question, but I want to sort of try to reach a bit back into older notions of thought and older traditionalist implications of what the idea of freedom could include. And I think most people today will link the concepts of freedom and democracy instinctively. And so I'll start with that and try to decouple these two ideas from each other. And the way I want to start by doing that is through some etymological gymnastics, if you will, some wordplay, some might call it. And I'll just go into it, and you can comment as we go along, Luddick. So, the word freedom. I did some hunting and found some older definitions of the word, and they paint a bit of a different picture than the way the word is used today. And on the Old English, or in the late 14th century English definition of freedom, it means exemption from arbitrary or despotic control or civil liberty. In the 16th century, this is the late 1500s, 1570 something, the meaning seems to have changed to possession of particular privileges. And
That's interesting. Is this from a dictionary?
This is from a dictionary. I tried to avoid as best as I could the mainstream sort of Merriam-Webster and stuff, because here a lot of them have been subverted, should we say.
Yeah, they probably have. I mean, at this point, yeah, if you ask yourself the question, like, has this source been subverted? You can just say yes. I think it's like 99 point some chance that it's been tampered with or something. So,
Right. And the core truth in the composition of these words is that it's an exemption from something, exemption from insert something, right? And especially in the first version, it's an exemption from arbitrary or despotic control specifically. It's not just blanket control. Usually, the story that's told is that all control is bad, all sort of rule is despotic by nature, but in this version of the word, it's specifically against, unjust rule or unjust control. And also, I would just note as sort of like a point of order that a possession of a privilege in many ways is the same meaning as exemption from something else. A privilege and an exemption, you can flip it on its head pretty much.
yes, it is the positive negative liberty concept.
Exactly.
It's interesting that this is as early as the late 16th century. I imagine people back then were still pretty big on the negative liberties. I know that the positive liberties and like the privilege aspect, it creeps in like the last century really, really quickly.
Oh, yes, obviously. And then I did a bit more digging, and I wanted to look at the root word, the word free. And I did some searches around different dictionaries and histories of the word, and I put together a couple of root meanings from older languages. And the Old English, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering the pronunciation of dead languages, you can at me on Twitter, I suppose. The word freo means not in bondage, noble, or joyful. Or in the Proto-Germanic, frias, beloved or not in bondage. And from here on, I found older versions of Old English and even some Norse versions of this word, and that is the freod, which means affection, friendship, and peace, and the nos frider, which means peace, personal security, love, and friendship.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I assume we're getting more into that, the kind of different ideas of freedom. I do think like the Scandinavian idea of freedom is a little different than the Anglo idea, which again is different than
Certainly.
the Germanic idea.
Right. And to me, then, this sort of picture forms of the older notion of what it means to be free or have freedom could be. And the key words that I'm pulling out of this is, the concept of nobility, affection, friendship, peace, and security. And in my head, where I'm at now, I think to myself, is this not the society that the classical liberal sort of envisions? A society where a man could build his own peace, security, build his friendship, show affection, and attain sort of nobility in spirit. But they're older than the classical liberal traditions, which is interesting because sort of these older notions of the words are sort of the shoulders of giants that the classical liberals then stand on when they define their versions of freedom. Did you have any comments?
So yeah, I did come to think about. You're talking about nobility. I'll just go back to the distinction between the Anglo and the Scandinavian sense of freedom. I might get more into this later if it's there are more slides that are a little bit more in that direction. But I've been reading.
We might
Robinson.
have some, but if nothing else, I wanted to talk about that after the slides. I wanted to have that sort of like as a discussion point after the slides.
All right. Yeah, I'll just add that point then, that I think
Okay.
the nobility and that idea comes with like with the Anglo idea of freedom, and I do believe the Anglo idea of freedom is rooted towards it's really less interested in the peace aspect, and more interested in kind of the self-sufficient, being able to be happy with oneself and have kind of mastery as
Yes.
an individual, and that goes very far back into their culture.
Uh-huh. And that's also specifically why I chose to look for, both English and Germanic. And when I found Norse versions of the word, I found it interesting that I could find some similarities, but also some differences that might have colored the culture, so to speak.
Yeah, I do think so. The Norwegian sort of conflict aversion. I think if you talk to the regular Norwegian person and they talk about freedom, I think they mean freedom from conflict.
Sure, sure. But also, in a sense, a that also lends itself to a sort of independence in a sense, and we'll get a bit into that. So my point with this is that these concepts of nobility, affection, friendship, peace, security, etc., all baked into these words, they then have roots that are far more old and far more spiritual than any of the materialistic notions of a classical liberal, like say a John Locke, for example. Um, and many of these words, as you mentioned, like the nobility, would be words that I think you said the Anglos, you said the Americans. I would say the settlers specifically. Settlers in America live by the sort of the nobility in terms of nobility through self governance, in a sense.
Yes.
Um,
So I could just make a little point about it, and I'll get deeper into it perhaps later in the stream. But I don't know. I don't know if you've read Robinson Crusoe, like the actual book.
no,
No, because I've been reading it as a sort of bedtime literature, and this was like it's actually it's a very old book. It's from like 1719 by the author Daniel Defoe. But it's interesting because the term Robinson Crusoe gets thrown around as like this very, it's a pointer to something very individualistic. And like this book is basically, to me, a kind of introduction into the Anglo psychology, where you have a person who is like from a sort of middle class, well-to-do family, who is then wants to go on adventures and is stranded on an island for almost 30 years and has to sort of learn everything from scratch, and ends up building his own kingdom on the island. So I think that is kind of the Anglo dream in a sense. It sort of mirrors like what they've been talking about on one of these academic agent streams, where they talked about the English public school, where the child is sort of removed from their parents and they have to be alone in a more sort of isolated environment, and that will be painful in the beginning, but it sort of builds into a certain type of character where they gain mastery over their surroundings
right,
and they
right.
become like king of their own island in a sense.
Uh huh.
So
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's something I want to talk about a bit later as well, because it's this difference between, the American independence versus I think specifically the Norwegian independence, because the value is high in a sense in both countries, but they're very different.
yes.
So my point is, having mentioned all of these concepts and how they're, sort of old words, old notions, traditional notions, whether they're Anglo or whether they're Germanic or Norse, they're older than whatever our society today is built upon. Uh, and you can think on your own life, right? How free are you actually today in your life to pursue, nobility, affection, friendship, security, etc., in a world that has restricted all of these to some extent? And I think for many people have restricted these a lot the past 2 years.
Most certainly. And well, I mean, it is an interesting thing. You did send me the link to that show. I mean, for the Norwegians in the audience, you probably
We'll
know who
get to
Harald.
it.
Yeah, we'll
Yes.
get to the
Yeah.
show, but yeah, the freedom restrictions is yeah, it's quite interesting, and I think especially for young people, this is a quite painful thing. I haven't spoken to that many people who are affected by it, who are sort of put into these. They're in school right now, and quite frankly, they are having their human rights stamped on every single day in terms of freedom of movement, freedom of association, and so forth. So
Yes.
I just wonder if there is this kind of building up this longing for freedom. Maybe that's just a kind of dream that I have.
Well, yes, I've mentioned it earlier that, there is a kernel in us, and I have like a small, tiny hope that one day that's a powder keg that's sort of gonna blow up, but I'm not sure. I'm getting a message here from Mongolian Doggerland saying, I think that was educating the imperial elite on Semiogog's channel. Was that referencing something you mentioned?
Maybe it was. Yeah, it sounds familiar. These things go a bit into each other, and I have a hard time remembering. But that seems appropriate to the theme.
Yes. As a final point on this, I will note, because I've been into René Guénon lately. My latest video was on the reign of quantity. And if we use his sort of lens, the words that I've mentioned, nobility, affection, friendship, peace, and security, are all to some extent the words of quantity. Sorry, of quality. They're not material words. They're not measurable. They're, well, if you read the book and you understand the philosophy, it's you'll see that these words are the words of quality. They're not any material word.
No, it's a very important thing to think about, especially in these fairs. You have the efforts in like the AA sphere. They talk about this deboomerization and the deliberalization, where you try to unlearn this kind of inbuilt liberal thinking.
Yes.
And a big part of that process is trying to move away from this constant quantitative spreadsheet thinking that you're inundated with.
I'll mention that I commented on Twitter. Let me see if I can find this up on my phone here. I had a case of that a couple of days ago when I came over a post from one Edward Dutton, who referenced the a graph that referenced the use of what he called rationality words, such as data, limit, result, determine, system, size, percent, etc., etc., and how this had sort of declined. The usage of these words had declined since the 1975, or since the 70s in general, and how words like imagine, wisdom, mind, think, believe, truth, feel, etc., had increased dramatically since 1975. And he laid the blame on feminism for increasing sort of feel words in our society. And while I won't be comfortable in criticizing Dutton in his work specifically, he's probably a much smarter man than me, I couldn't help but note to myself that this was, all of these words that he mentioned as rational words, I would categorize as words of quantity: data, system, etc.
Yes.
Right?
I agree. Actually, I don't know if it was Ngram that he used. Is it possible that we could bring up Ngram now?
Do you have a link to it?
No, let's see. You can just search for Google Ngram. It's going to be the first
Ngram.
Because I did a sort of funny search on this.
Well, I can probably find his tweet.
Let's see.
I just have to find my own Twitter here. I don't have it up right now because I didn't want to accidentally sort of like show the tweet on stream, but I can find my. Here it is. I will share this with
I'll put it
the
in the
audience.
private chat now as a sort of link that you could look at.
I have this as well. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll show both, and we can do this, and then we can go back to the presentation. Let's see here. Just a bit of boomerism with the technology. Bear with me. Here we go. Oh, he writes, what did feminism ever do for us? It led to the collapse of rational words and the rise of feeling words, especially since 1980. And here's the graph.
And, rationality words. We have analysis,
rationality words,
data,
which I think they have some value, of course, but my first thought was, wait, these are all words of quantity. I should take care not to sort of marry myself to them.
No, I see. Can you bring up the Ngram link? Because I think we could have some fun with
it.
Yes.
Let's see here.
Could you, if you go up to the search bar there, if you put a comma and then you put in the word percent, you can get that as well.
Like this?
We could put it, yeah, just the percenter. So here you can see like the use of words.
Right.
You know, like the word virtue is very interesting because it's going on a steep decline there from the 1800s. Rationality is going up. Percent is just going.
Can I not have this? Okay, there we go.
Yeah. You could probably try to punch in some of the words that Dutton had in the tweet there. So maybe we could make a comparison.
So you had data, and you had let's see here. You had analysis. You had result. You had system. And you know, this is lay science at best. You know, this isn't very analytical in the terms of like I'm not an etymologist or anything, but it's just interesting to me that, you know, and you can see it in the usage of words here that, you know, it's an older way of thinking to sort of reject these types of words, or I would say that using these words represents our newer way of thinking.
Oh yeah, but I mean, you can see the sort of peak of the technocratic thinking, or the data thinking is in the 80s.
Yes,
and then it seems people are either getting dumber or they kind of lose interest in that style of thinking about things. Let me see.
That might be true, and I'm not saying, you know, he's wrong and I'm right. I think it's a very, you know, it has its place. It's just important to remember, if you're trying to break out of the modernity or boomer truth or the 1945 mythos mindset, to be aware when you spot, as I said, words of quantity and ask yourself, is this actually a good thing, or is it just how it was before 1980?
Yes, no, I totally agree. Like I'm also working on trying to like deprogram myself from using these words too much and being wary of these approaches. Just a funny comment there, because I'm seeing like this sort of around the time you have like there's the peak in the 1980s and there's a slight peak towards the middle. It goes a little bit back up and then it drops again. So, I mean, when it goes back up again, that's about 1984, 1985. And that's when like Neuromancer comes out. The sort of William Gibbons,
right?
That's like the god novel of all science fiction and this sort of data,
yeah, it's like
Matrix,
system
all this
shock
kind of stuff,
and everything. Yeah, it's like
I think that's where the ideas come, and then they experiment with them.
Neuromancer was the first one to have like the what's the cyberspace where you like jack into the Matrix or whatever, right?
Yep. So I mean, he had all of these ideas. From what I understand of background information, is that William Gibbons is not a technical person, but he was I think he was in New York, and he would just walk into these cafes that are close to the financial districts and just listen in on people talking. And they would just be spitting out all of these, like these types of words, system data, all of this lingo stuff, and just mash this together into a kind of sci-fi universe.
Right. Well, it's Certainly interesting. It was an interesting diversion. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make it a point that sometimes you can spot these things, and you might learn something if you do. Okay, so if you now would allow me to once again pull out the book I had on my conservatives and libertarians stream called Liberty or Equality, The Challenge of Our Times by Eric Ritter von Kunolt-Ledin, I would like to read a page from it. And you will have to bear with me. See here. If self-government is viewed from a national or collectivist point of view, if a multitude is considered to be one organism with something like a responsible group soul, and if we simply identify the greater part with the whole, then the talk about self-government is justified. Yet such a point of view is only possible on a nostrist and vostrist basis, and political power from such a source comes curiously near to the anathematized statement in the syllabus. It is obvious that all these vistas are unacceptable to anyone clinging on to a non-materialistic philosophy. We have to reject them as figmentary and return consciously to the realities of the human person. It is, after all, man, with all his glories and shortcomings, and all his desires, longings, and emotions, his reason, his faith, and his despair, who faces history and politics, and not some imaginary polycephalic centipede. To the philosopher of the new mechanism, the difference between the effectiveness of one person's vote among 5 and among 500,000 will merely be in degree. The statement is mathematically correct, but existentially, this is by no means the case. Let us go a step further. If, for instance, the voters of France should be graphically represented by a solid column of the height of the Eiffel Tower, one individual vote would measure not more than 1/3000th part of an inch. In a modern mammoth state, the individual at national elections is nothing more than a microbe. Whether he in particular goes to the polls or not makes hardly any difference. His person and personality, as Aristotle stated melancholically, is counted and not weighed, and thus treated by number but not by importance. That's just something I wanted to read for you.
Yeah.
And if we sort of apply again in my notes here, I have noted that I have to mention Gwynon again. I think it makes it clear that the democracy of today, and especially, and I think democracy in general, should we believe Knut Ledin here, is an entity of quantity. Because it allows no room for any quality, because they're all parts of the old freedom, or the old notion of the word freedom, as we discussed earlier.
Yes, it was a beautiful passage. It's something I probably need to hear multiple times to kind of fully absorb.
Yeah, it's a long passage, but it's a very well written book, and he quotes a lot of things. So it's a bit of a hard one to just pull out without the sort of context. But I figured I'd try to read it and see if I could do something with it, because I
Yes.
liked it when I read it myself.
But yeah, democracy is, like you said, it's like this reign of quantity thought, one man, one vote. But of course, that's usually not the whole story. I mean, they're going to add more calculus to it because they'll, for some reason, they'll have weight votes, or what do they have in America? They have these sort of district
The mandates
seats and the mandates.
Yeah.
So, but it's usually like it doesn't matter how they try to slice the pie. It always comes down to some
Electoral
other quantity,
college
electoral
word,
colleges, and
yeah.
It comes down to just more equations, basically. They just make the mathematics more complicated.
And
to
I guess
understand.
my point is that in that sort of society, or in that sort of system, there's no room for, going back to the root words here, there's no room for nobility, affection, friendship, peace, and security.
That's just
in a spiritual sense.
Yeah, I mean, for you try to talk to a normie about these things, these ideas are just completely foreign. I've tried to do this, like try to bring up these types of topics, and it's really something that needs to be massaged in multiple times before that's something that can be processed.
Exactly.
I don't know. Do
Okay.
you have experience with that? You try to talk to normies about the qualitative
Hey,
values and virtues.
I have, but I learned that the hard way when trying to look for a wife, if I could put it that way. Like talking to girls when I was in university some years back. After sort of waking up and realizing what I wanted to do with my life. That was my first like big like, what the fuck is going on with everyone else, when I started talking, like trying to talk to people about like real deep issues and just asking people what they wanted to do with their life, right? And I guess coming hot of some Stefan Molyneux, one of my pet sort of ways to entertain myself when I was bored was to talk to my um, female friends or acquaintances, and just sort of ask them like, what do you want to work with, and do you want to have kids, and then just follow, well, shouldn't you have like try to have kids before you start working, etc., etc. And and you know, it always results in like a complete shutdown, like if on their part. Like, not that they're shutting me down, but they're just lock up and go in full defensive mode, right? Because it's simply out of their mode of thinking. It's outside of their personal Overton window, I suppose.
Yes.
To use the Jonathan Haidt metaphor, I guess their elephant gets scared and tries to run away. But you're trying to talk to the rider, right?
Yes, I mean it is. I've experienced the same thing too. I've sort of worked in different. I've worked at different places, and you try to talk to a lot of different people, and bringing up some of these topics. Some people are just not interested. It's kind of like they have a kind of straight railroad track that they're going to go down, and whatever happens, happens. So, but
yeah,
this,
and there's no like continuity about like, well, what if this happens, right? You're just living one day to the next, not thinking about where your end goal is. I'm not saying you have to have your entire life planned out, but some of these things are actually on a timer.
yeah.
Like you have to think about this.
See, yeah, Norden on post, just find a girl with no opinions. It's actually good advice. I've seen guys like Sam Hyde and others give that advice. It's actually really, really good advice. Like you'll find some girl who's just who's just kind of apolitical, and she's just interested in being with you because you're identifiably masculine and you have some good qualities. So
That might
then
be
she'll just
true. I think
adopt your politics eventually.
I was going to say, I think the spicy take here is to say that if you're a strong enough man, you're going to pull her in your direction anyway.
Yeah, because there's a vacuum there.
Unless, of course, she's like, if you're like right wing and she's like a radical leftist feminist. I mean, why are you even doing it to begin with?
Yeah, I don't know. Unless you want to try to do some of that sort of hot and spicy romance,
Well,
hate
sure,
love
but
relationship
that's,
stuff,
I mean,
but it's not a
that's
long
not
term
marriage.
plan. So
Yeah. All right. Let's go on.
Just a little point there.
Yeah.
In terms of like the no opinions, something that I've been thinking about this week, and it does relate to my job because I mean, there's a lot of Norwegian boomers that I deal with. I mean, including this guy on the screen right now. He's not technically a boomer. He's actually a Gen Xer.
Yeah, I'll
But
get into it. But
yeah.
his frame of mind, or his frame of arguing, is very mired in boomer truth.
It's very boomer truthy, but it's like the Norwegian version of boomer truth that has certain particulars that are different from the Anglo boomer truth and the Americana boomer truth. But what I have noticed is that, especially with guys like him that are like this Gen X liberal, 90s liberal types, there's I've started to use the word dialectic a lot after hearing it used in the AA sphere. And there's a certain dialectic there where they have this kind of almost nihilistic liberalism, where it's like, oh well, everything is good, and I mean it's cool because they are more tolerant and they're willing to discuss things. but they always leave a vacuum there. That if you have an organization, this is what I believe now, just after like the last 2 years and with the places that I worked, if you have an organization that is staffed with say like 80% of people that have this sort of boomer kind of liberal boomer attitude where they're kind of, they're tolerant and they're tolerating different viewpoints and everybody should
It's
be
just good
heard,
vibes, man.
it's just good vibes and we want to have a good time. Like this organization is going to be subverted. It's like
Oh
it's
yeah,
like an unguarded field of oats or something. Like the birds are just going to come and eat it.
yeah.
So if you get like 2 people into that organization that have an agenda, like they're going to have that agenda run through within, I guess, like 2-3 years. The entire company is just going to be run by them, and they're going to have set every agenda point because they're like they actually know where they want to go in life.
Yes.
And they have an agenda, they know like an end goal, and they are actually ideologically motivated. Those people are always going to dominate, like sort of tightly organized people with clear plans.
And everyone else is just going to follow along because since they have no foundation, they're going to be scared of being called a racist, right?
Yes.
So
I mean, they have no counterpoints. Like they have no actual. There's nowhere they can put the foot down. They don't have an actual. I mean, if I say that I want to, use gender neutral pronouns on everything in the company, well, they don't have a counter argument. They have never thought about why you should not do that or why you should not change language or anything like that. So they're just going to go along with it because they have no solid kind of absolute frame of reference for why that's wrong.
yeah, it's like, well, what's the harm, right?
Well, this doesn't harm anyone. It's just,
and sure, maybe that one thing isn't so harmful, but like 20 years later, and we're fucked, right? So.
Yeah, I'm seeing Lucky Pants here. It talks about the Brainwash documentary. So I thought I would do a little rant on that
quick
one later.
for the other sort of the non-Norwegians in the audience. The man on the screen here is a Norwegian comedian and sociologist, and he has done this specifically is from a series he did for the Norwegian state-run media called "This Is Norway." And he explores aspects of Norwegian society and culture, I suppose, in sort of like a John Oliver Last Week Tonight format. Is the closest thing I could sort of like relate it. I guess
it is the late night talk show, and I think
Yes.
for like I think we have a lot in common, Walrus, and we are not the target audience for this stuff. But the
No.
like regular Norwegian middle class person, like this is their template for social interaction. And I'll
Yes.
tell that right now too. If you want to move to Norway, if you want to try to talk to like most Norwegians, middle class Norwegians, you just go watch these sort of late night talk shows, and then you can sort of understand how the social interaction is supposed to go. Because they'll watch that stuff and they'll read like these sort of MSM newspapers, and they'll have the MSN opinions, and the format of talking and the format of joking and the irony and the sarcasm is all like just carbon copy from these talk shows.
Yes, and it's removed from any sort of authenticity. It's a good luck I'm hiding behind 7 layers of irony, right?
Yes, always. I like in the Delibra, I began to hate irony. I really just started to train myself to not be ironic and to not use that tool. Just take it out of the toolbox.
I try, but it's hard.
Yeah. You'll become less liberal. That's the training
Certainly.
program.
So the text here on the screen that he has next to him says, "Why are Norwegians the most free people in the world?" And he bases this on the fact that in a lot of surveys, like world surveys, etc., Norwegians always score very highly on like value surveys. They score highly, if not the highest, on the value independence. And that's part of why I think it's very interesting, because it's this weird dichotomy of Norwegians being very collectivist and at the same time being very like, leave me alone.
Yes. So he does that in the first episode where he scores the values. I don't know. It would be nice if we had a picture of the graph, because there's some uncomfortable stuff in that graph when I was watching it. Is that Norwegians are probably like in the bottom like when you look at the entire world, they're at the bottom when it comes to saving and frugalness,
Yes.
which is that was pretty painful to look at, because this is just a map of decadence. That's what I thought when I looked at it. It's people who want to be independent and they don't want to save, so they just want to be like this kind of bug man consumer. That's sort of their that's what I read out of it.
Right. And the gist of this talk, and why I've titled the slide "The Freedom Machine," is that he goes through sort of parts of the Norwegian society and identifies sort of the Norwegian state as the freedom machine that allows Norwegians to live independent of, let's say, family obligations, workplace relations, societal norms, etc. And I don't think his analysis is wrong per se. Like it's not untrue, but it is mired, as we said, in the boomer viewpoint, or the 1945 mythos.
Yes,
Um,
that's what I would like to say, at least about this guy. Like, you know, he has this kind of 90s liberal sprinkled with all this boomer truth, but his takes are surprisingly not bad on a
yeah,
lot of things. He's able to, I mean, at least with this kind of Gen X 90s liberalism, just call a spade on certain things, and not
yes.
have to kowtow to this sort of progressive language. So
Yeah,
you
and
can
he's
get,
landed in some
yeah.
hot water, I remember, in the media, when he's released a couple of documentaries that talks about some spicy stuff. And he usually, he tries to defend himself with the science, and so far that's worked out for him, because he talks about the uncomfortable parts of the science usually.
Yeah, I mean, it is a good model. I've been thinking about that stuff when we talk about elites and we talk about cancellations and how exactly this stuff works. That, you know, Rogan's been in the paper recently with that Neil Young stunt, where like Neil Young would try to cancel Rogan from Spotify over some misinformation, let's just say. And I think there are like a certain path that you can take where it's very difficult to cancel you. And this guy, you know, before he went into more of this kind of politicky biology and sociology type of entertainment, he just did comedy, and he was
Right.
very, very popular. So he gained a sort of popular audience, and he is sort of a big draw for crowds, and has good relations to people. So when he starts kind of saying some slightly spicy stuff, it's harder to just cancel him immediately because he's kind of already in the machine.
But at the
So
same time, because of that, his impact is severely lessened. So, you
yes.
know, it doesn't really go anywhere. Like he can feel smug having, you know, critiqued society, but it doesn't change anything.
No, that's we could get into that later, maybe about Hjernevask, but that
Yes.
was the funny part about it. It's like, okay, he will, you know, do this documentary and bring up all of these quote unquote kind of based knowledge, but what's the end result of it? It is basically just paving the way for the progressives. It really
Yeah,
is,
paving the
because
way for the
yeah,
progressives to implement policies to make sure this doesn't happen.
yeah. No, I can just
So,
no, I can just I'll just give my take on that really quickly. Uh, yeah, I mean, yeah, Novoski will go into a lot of these topics like gender differences, if that's biological, you know, racial differences in IQ and so forth. So, like, very, uh, you know, divisive third rail topics. And what he comes like he concludes basically saying that, you know, genetic differences between sexes and, like, you know, nurture is really not that important. It's basically nature that determines who you become as a person. But the problem with this conclusion is that it goes in this very liberal direction that, you know, well, you know, everybody's just kind of determined by their genes, bro. You know, you can't do anything about it. It's just so with all of these SJW professors that he interviews, the conclusion is that basically, well, you know, they're wrong. They're wrong in this social constructivist stuff, but they can't do anything about biology anyway. So at worst, they're just wasting money. They're just wasting money and wasting
right.
time. But in reality, I mean, it is a little bit of both. Like, they actually have an effect. And people walking away from that show is just going to think that, well, you know, it doesn't matter if you have someone teaching your kid about transgenderism at 3 years old, because biology, I mean, if that child was biologically programmed to be trans, they're just going to become trans anyway. So you might as well not give a damn
And I
about what your
think
kid
sort of time
learns.
has rebutted his claims there. It's been quite a few years since that documentary released, and I think the percentages of child transgender cases has dramatically increased out of
Oh
quote
yes.
unquote nowhere.
So I mean, he made fun of these people. Like he'll go and make fun of a lot of these SJW professors, and he'll bring like the problem is I thought that the case he made when I rewatched Jan not too long ago, I thought the case was a lot stronger. What he does is that he will interview Norwegian. It's like the sort of virgin Chad dichotomy where he'll just do one part where he interviews like the virgin Norwegian sociologist versus the Chad British psychologist, and
Yes, I remember that.
with like you have the American and the Anglo psychologists, and they have a lot of confidence and they're very assertive in their opinions, and they have these sort of insecure Norwegians who can't back up their claims and they can't defend their research and so on. So he makes them look bad. It is a smear job for a lot of the people who work there. But if the conclusion is basically that, genes are just going to trump everything, then that it just justifies this kind of lazy Norwegian independence liberalism idea further. So, and that paves the way for the woke stuff to come in.
Yes.
So that is kind of the dialectic problem here. That one thing is just opens the door for the other thing. And now we're here.
Yes. It's Cthulhu always swims left in that way, and unfortunately he's just hurrying it along, or textbook containment, as Lucky Pants call it. I'll comment here, Jack Ruby. I think I found this channel from a really insightful comment a Walrus left somewhere. I can't even remember it. I don't comment a lot, so I'm just going to go off the top of my head. It could be like a Prudentialist video, or maybe a Charlemagne video, or Andrei Moisejev on YouTube, the musician I referred to a couple of streams back. That's all I can remember actually having commented on. But welcome, sir. Please subscribe if you haven't. Okay. So there's one example he brings up that I want to sort of run with going forward in his talk in this specific show. And that is the department Lånekassen in Norwegian, which is a department which exists to provide cheap student loans to pretty much everyone who wants it. As long as you've been accepted into a university, you have access to cheap student loans. And by cheap, I mean you get a very low interest rate on the loan. They more or less just want the money that they have loaned you back, with a little bit of interest, but compared to anything else, it's nothing. And this department passes no judgment on you and what you've decided to study, if you should rather be, supporting your family, etc., which is his argument. A clan, so to speak, would maybe have something to say about you studying history or feminist paintings, instead of getting a quote-unquote real job. But a child going into a Norwegian university can then more easily sever ties with their family and with their support structure and community from where they're from. And that's sort of his argument on how this grants you freedom in this specific sense, but he uses it on other departments and other systems as well.
Oh yeah, I just
okay.
a sort of follow-up comment there, because we did the stream on Norwegian history, and he will go into like multiple departments we have in Norway, that it's like the welfare departments and department for student loans and so on. And I mean, this infrastructure has been underway for quite some time. It does build on the Gerhardsen government, like the labor governments that are putting in like this extensive welfare state, and then the liberalization that happens in the 80s. It's really is a project that's been underway for a long time.
Yes, it's in a sense just a culmination, and that's what my point was in the next one, really, because all of this is just the second half of the boomer truth mythos, I guess. I guess it's academic agent who defined the two parts of the mythos as the warhawk right wing and the freedom of expression John Lennon peace sign part of it, and this is that notion, the be yourself man, just taken to a state level and an extreme. And if we're going to run with the university example, we're going to say that a young man is going out into the world, in a sense. If we follow Jungian psychology, the idea here is that, now if you're leaving or not physically, that's not really relevant. This is physically, it's psychologically, or it's spiritually. It can be every one of them, but the man has to sort of embark on the hero's journey in one way or another, or leave the nest, I suppose, leave the comforts of his home, where he will be tested, and he'll return triumphant, because he has learned to shoulder the responsibility of the real world, and then sort of be able to move towards true spiritual freedom. But this freedom machine, this state apparatus, removes any of the dangers of this journey, and it undermines the gains, and it undermines the value from the spiritual journey, because it just hands it to you for free, in a sense. As I was writing my notes, I had to include the quote from Starship Troopers from Rajek: "Something given has no value." Because you're given this journey for free, you never really learn it. But at the same time, it cuts you off from your family. You have no ties other than, this is your mother, this is your father, you should be nice to them, right? Which is, okay, cool, that's a cultural thing. But there's no real world connection to your parents anymore. And
Yes.
because this journey has been robbed from you, you have to sort of shoulder your own responsibility, or you have to learn or relearn what it means to shoulder your own responsibility. And you have to relearn on your own how to become noble, how to find nobility, how to show affection, how to build friendships, and obtain the spiritual freedoms that we were talking about with the words earlier. And some people, we say it takes a long time for some people, they don't quote unquote grow up. And I think that's what we mean, right? And I think I'm just going to keep going because I'm almost done. Then you can comment. Sorry. I think I think there was a lot of writing when Jordan Peterson came to Norway, because he had such a large following here in Norway, and every single person that they interviewed who had gone to his show, this was in like 2017, 2018, I don't remember.
I was there.
Oh, you were there.
I was there. I met Hans-Jørgen Lysglimt, actually.
Oh, nice.
He gave me a MAGA hat, and I asked him about Austrian economics and the think tank that he was going to build at some point, so he didn't have any answer for it.
Right.
But I can go on with that later. Just finish the thoughts here.
Well, my point is that this is part of why it was such a huge phenomenon in Norway. I'm not saying it wasn't elsewhere as well, but I think it was incredibly strong here, because Peterson himself mentions it time and time again, and I've mentioned it myself in the very first video I did, is that he kind of just explains the concept of the requirement for you to bear responsibility, and strangely enough, he just explains it to you in a way that sort of clicks in your bones for many young men, and you just think to yourself, well, that makes sense. Kind of like you're rediscovering like forgotten knowledge that or maybe even forbidden knowledge, and in a sense I guess you are, because no one taught it to you, because it's an old notion. But I'm sure you can comment yourself on the Peterson thing, because everyone I found who they interviewed about going to see a Peterson talk were like, well, he talks about taking responsibility, and I think that's great. That's everyone says that.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff you brought up here that I could take in different directions. I just want to go back to. I mean, I was actually at this thing. So, I mean, for me, I felt like, Jordan Peterson was interesting. I liked his sort of Disney lectures and that stuff. But I mean, I had certain like tragedies that happened in my life that meant I had to take some more responsibility. And so I kind of had to go through this stuff a little bit before Jordan Peterson was introduced. So for me, it was a little bit, too late. But I had a lot of friends that were really into it. And, they brought me with them to go see him in Oslo. This was really interesting because it was before he went to rehab for like this benzodiazepine addiction. And like we all commented on that when he came out, that it seemed like there was something terribly wrong with him. I know that this doesn't have anything to do with the topic. I just thought this was funny to discuss. We were thinking about it, if he's like tired or if he was been damaged in some sense.
Certainly
I don't
looks
know
a bit more hollow in some of the later.
Yeah, I mean,
later pictures.
He walks crooked. Basically, he's like, it's really funny because that's this is like the book tour for 12 Rules for Life, and I think one of the rules is keep your back straight. I don't know if that's like rule number 1 or rule number 2. Let's see if I can just Google that stuff.
Don't remember either.
12.
I'll comment while you Google it. I can say
that.
Sorry, I can say while you Google it that I was probably a little bit late, or not late. I had a similar sort of journey as you, Ludwig, where, I was forced to, quote unquote, learn the ways of the world a bit earlier. But when Peterson came along, it was the lectures that caught me, not necessarily his live shows, but it sort of just reaffirmed the direction I was already heading in. So it wasn't a great, like, wake up moment for me. It was more like, all right, I'm on the right path kind of confirmation, I guess.
Yep. No, I found the rules now. It's actually rule number 1. 12 rules for life, an antidote for chaos. Rule number 1, stand up straight with your shoulders straight. And,
Right.
and this was just to illustrate how absurd this was, because David Rubin was his touring companion on this, and he came out before Jordan Peterson. There was nothing wrong with him. He was very high energy, and like it had the feeling of a concert. And that's kind of like the crowd was a little bit rowdy and a little bit sort of, they were serving alcohol as well before you went in there. So I assume that a lot of the people there were hoping for a bit of sort of like a high energy performance. So Ruben is like, okay, here's who everyone's been waiting for, 12 rules for life, Jordan Peterson. And they have the rules there. It's like stand up straight with your shoulders straight. And he's walking in like kind of just crooked, struggling like he's like this old man. That's just, his back is just so, everything is just crooked, and it's kind of weird about him and awkward. And like, David Rubin has to almost signal to kind of to calm the crowd down, because it seemed like it would just be too disruptive, and they couldn't take questions from the audience, basically, because they had to just do these pre-planned questions, because he wouldn't have been able to answer anything, I think, spontaneously. It was just too broken up.
Wow.
So
it must have been. I mean, I didn't at the time. When that whole addiction thing came out, I was, way past it, so I didn't really pay attention to it. But I didn't realize it was that bad.
I was just thinking, yeah, that makes sense. When that came out, I knew that there was something something up there. So, I mean,
my point ultimately here is that this freedom machine that exists in Norway ultimately leads to just like freedom from responsibility. It doesn't lead to true freedom, which I think is only obtained through responsibility, through the words we talked about with nobility and peace and these kinds of things, where the to pull the Curtis Yarvin or the Moldbuggian Carlyle a pyramid of needs where you have to progress towards peace and order and law before you can actually achieve freedom.
It's a freedom machine. It's not a hero machine. So,
right. And heroes can't, and only heroes can build free worlds. Is my point.
Yes. So, but I mean, the freedom machine. It's funny that they call it a machine because it is completely predicated on the concept of freedom from in terms of quantity. That is like the more modern idea of the spreadsheet freedom. And of course, that's from
materialistic freedom.
Yeah, materialistic, and even in terms of if you talk to economists, that's what they're going to give you. They're going to talk about, the freedom that you have in the market, and look at the living standards. They've raised it up so much, and everybody's living like kings now compared to what they did 100 years ago, 200 years ago. But
thanks, I get to go on Tinder and get STDs. Thanks, technology, very good.
I mean, the dynamic, the ability to, you're not, you're just free as an individual. You're free to just insert things in your body in different places. But if you talk about the ability to, free to organize yourself, it's actually
free to say no to be inserted by other things.
That's the thing as well.
I'm trying to talk around it. Yeah,
we're talking around it, but I'm coming back to if you talk about reactionary philosophy and old ideas. Carlyle is old, but then you have even older ideas of freedom. We could go back to Thomas Aquinas and the sort of his idea of freedom, that is basically freedom from desire. It's like freedom from sin.
Yeah, so you have a man has as many masters as he has. As he has vices. Yeah.
Yes. Right. You hear it from Michael Jones, but I'm not a Catholic, but I think Aquinas is a very valuable theologian. It's something that you're almost. We talk about how you're sort of indoctrinated into this quantitative way of thinking. And
Julius Flavius with a good correction here, that we're not living like kings because the kings were spiritually virile, and I'll agree with that. That's another point where we can sort of all learn and think in traditional sense that kings, or the title of king, is a lot more than its modern notion.
Or at least we're living like a sort of inbred monarchy.
The decadence of kings, I suppose.
But that's also late stage.
That's also wrong. Yeah.
But I was to try to finish the point. Like, you have the Aquinas definition that you're actually, the freedom that you can acquire it's only freedom if you have self mastery. Like, you have mastery over your desires. If you are sort of, we get back to the previous podcast when we talked about pornography. When I was watching the documentary on pornography, you had these liberal lawyers coming out and talking about, if these feminists get their way and they're, with their authoritarian tendencies, and they're going to deny us the pornography, we're going to be living in 1984. I want to have my freedom. And like, it's completely contrary to that Aquinas notion of freedom, where you're free from that stuff. You're free from your horniness. Basically, you're free from the bloodlust, or you're free from the attachment, the sort of greed, and all of these. Like, you could look up the 7 deadly sins. We could go even further back to the Greek philosophers and the Stoics, where they also have that concept of, you're free to be virtuous. That's the freedom you have. You might be a sort of slave on a galley, or you're going to be hanged tomorrow, but you can still choose to do the virtuous thing. And that's
Jenner 95 with the savior. Thus a good man, though a slave, is free, but a wicked man, though a king, is a slave, for he serves not one man alone, but what is worse, as many masters as he has vices.
Perfect.
Thank you.
That's a great summary. And we go even further back than that when we have Buddhism that I've been reading. I'm reading a book on currently, and they also have a concept of freedom. Or in Asia, the idea of freedom is not. It is a little bit different, but they talk about freedom from attachment. Talk about how you're very attached to things like your material possessions. these social connections that you have. You're attached to your own body, your own thoughts.
And that's where people like Gwynon and later Evola would sort of draw their inspirations from. It's this notion of, you know, the words of or the notion of quality and quantity is in a sense an interpretation of the old Aristotelian takes on it, but with like a spiritually Eastern take on it. If you read The Reign of Quantity, you can see a lot of inspiration from these nations.
I've read a little bit of Evola, not any of Gwynon, though I have it on the bookshelf. But I do understand that sort of Eastern ideas. I think Gwynon converts to Islam or something in the end of his career.
He did, yes. And Evola did some like flirting with it, but I don't think he ever did. But I think that might actually be like a disputed thing if he ever like actually became Islamic.
It's just too much. I mean, Evola is just a little bit all over the place. I mean, he's just read too much. You know, you have these people who like these kind of right-wing intellectuals where they've just read every book on everything ever, and like they just have this stack of beliefs that it's just impossible to process. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Julius Flavius says he was a Sufi. I might be confusing that. Yes, you're right. Now that I think about it, that's a good save.
So that's the esoteric branch of Islam. That's kind of like it's not very much to do with Islam, actually, from what I understand.
That's an important distinction, which is, you know, thank you for keeping me honest. I will also mention I did a stream on Hamsun a couple of now it's I guess a couple of months ago, and he also mentions in some of his essays that he mentions the difference in the materialism of the West and the spirituality of the East, and how that might lead to America's downfall in the future, or at least he's worried about it, and I think maybe he was right.
Yeah, no, I think he was right. I mean, we go a little bit back and forth on these things, but you do, you know, when you get back to the Freedom Machine talk show, he does sort of contrast the American society with the Norwegian one, and this comes from this sort of Norwegian boomer dialectic where like they basically see themselves as superior to Americans, but every value they have is an American import. Like it's just completely reactive to the American dialectic. And you see a lot of them have the idea that, you know, if only Bernie Sanders could be president, they could have like basically our system.
And you could have the Nordic socialism that's so great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that can just be implemented, right? There doesn't have to be anything pre that. It's not like a layered cake where you need to have different things put in place, like a welfare state, and you need a homogenous society.
You just give people money, Ludwig.
Yeah, you just implement those policies.
Just give money.
Just get Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is the president, and he just puts these policies in place, and they're going to have the same living standards as us. And yeah, it's going to be great. It's that simple. I mean, well, I don't understand why the Americans don't get this stuff.
Something works for a population of 5 million. Yeah, that can be extrapolated.
It is because of the Republican brainwashing. That's the Norwegian Norwegian take on it, because it's these Republicans that are basically, they have these brainwashing machines and they're just messing with people's heads, and so they don't realize that freedom is actually the Nordic socialism. They're just 2 steps away from it. But like if we could just get rid of Trump, you know, if we could just get rid of him, then they could have Nordic socialism.
We're talking about it now. I want to just mention it real quick because we have been talking about doing like a Nordic media overview, like how it's different in the different countries. But I will say how utterly sort of part of the cathedral the Norwegian journal classes. It's almost scary. How fast they sort of tend to get their talking points from across the pond, as we say.
Yeah, we could do a stream on that. I mean, there is this company that's called NTB that is basically like this news article delivery service. So I
like
wondered,
Reuters does, where they just sort of like publish facsimiles of.
I think we're both software developers. So I think it would be interesting to look on the back end there how much input these journalists actually have about over the stuff that's being written, because I assume they just get a lot of pre-written articles where all of the stuff is there, and they just kind of edit a little bit and they translate a little bit and they put their face on it and it's shipped out.
Yeah, that might be interesting to look into. I am out of slides. Do you want to talk any more about the difference or like the specifics of how independence works in Norway versus, for example, the America or
Yeah,
the US?
they did talk about like the differences that their Norwegians are able to be less connected to their parents because they're not relying on the sort of student loans in the same way that the Americans are, which is a fascinating thing. And they do put these things up as like, well, over there they have to really think about their money and be attached to the clan, as you said, who's going to decide how they spend it. But it's very interesting when you consider how many Americans that are taking these completely useless degrees. I mean, you would think
Yes.
that it's okay. They're going to have to. They're spending like $100,000 on a degree, maybe 200,000-300,000. I've seen if they change their major, but they still go for these completely useless degrees, and America is just saturated with people like communications degrees and people like with these sort of feminist literature studies, and they paid so much money for it, but they just keep doing it, and it doesn't seem to matter how much they raise the tuitions.
Well,
They
no,
keep coming
because
back.
yeah.
So I wish, for me, that's kind of a dent in this sort of whole libertarian argument, and that really it is almost kind of painful for me to admit that, because I would always make the case previously when I'd have more of like this liberal, conservative, libertarian disposition that well, it's their own money, they're gonna handle their own money, and they're gonna be more responsible. So that's why you shouldn't have this kind of state-sponsored welfare stuff, because they're just going to be reckless. But you're seeing these people like they're allowed to borrow money and they're just as reckless, even though they have to pay it back. I
Yes,
don't even know
I
what to
will
make of
say
it.
that I don't think necessarily the problem is always Gibbs. It's not always the fact that, the state has to do a thing, which is, the libertarian thing that anything that the state is involved in is inherently bad. I think it's more about the I lost my train of thought. Sorry. I think it's more about the impact that. No, sorry, I lost it. Go on. I'll get it in a moment.
You could just go on, but like they'll just go on and do these useless degrees, and I mean the Norwegian is sort of free to study the useless stuff, and I mean at least you're going to have less debt. I guess that is the difference, or the debt service is going to be a lot easier. The interest rate is low when you have good conditions, like you can bankrupt yourself of that
Yes.
debt, or you can pause the debt payments. It's a very kind debt to have. I a couple of years ago, I was very into listening to some of these American shows about money management, and I would watch this. What's his name? The Dave Ramsey show, and they have all these
Oh yeah.
people calling in constantly about like being able to handle student debt and paying down on these loans, and I I was just it just blows my mind. I just had it was just a funny experience to listen to the amount of pain these people had to go through to pay down like loans for some useless stuff that they're never gonna it's never gonna pay off.
Yeah. Yeah. But
You
but
familiar with
that's
that
back
show
to the
too?
whole, I mean, even I don't even think that's a libertarian value at this point. But it's the same point of something given has no value. There has to be some sacrifice. There has to be some limits on a societal good for it to be worth something. And something like a university education, since that's what we're talking about, which is what I was trying to get into before I lost my train of thought. It's not about if the state is involved in education. It's about what that education means and how the access to it is controlled. And allowing everyone to go to university will inevitably just, make it worthless.
So then we get back to what we were talking about in the previous stream on technology when we had Green River on and talking about how
Yes,
we
it's
should have just
essentially the
stayed
same
with
thing.
we should have just stayed with the command prompt and just had a barrier to entry on it. And that's a conservative value. I think it's really more of a reactionary value, and something that, I mean, to me this is super important. But the direction society is going in now with progressive values is the exact opposite. Every barrier to entry needs to be smashed.
Well, yes, that's the that's the progressive modus operandi. You smash until you can't smash anymore, and then you wonder why that fence was standing there. As the barbarians are are entering your borders.
Yeah. So then we're getting in more on that the topic of the defense.
Yeah, it was
Which
more
is,
like a GK Testerson thing, but
yeah, no,
yeah.
I've heard it, but I was starting to think about the military, because that is sort of like the last. You'd think that the military is like the last vestige of actual masculinity, but that is also very well underway in the process of being progressified, becoming like this more sort
I'm
of
very happy
inclusionary
that all
organization.
our women are going to be sent to war with Russia soon. That's great.
Oh, that's going to
Thanks,
be great. It's
liberalism.
very good self-actualization for them. It's going to look good on their CVs, and they can take photos and post on
Die in
Instagram.
the mud of Siberia. Yeah.
I think I posted it. I was listening to a debate around this topic, but I feel like it's the sort of peak progressive value when all of our fertile women are just put in front of enemy gunfire, and then like we've reached top like progressive utopia. I mean, it's just pure idiocy. It should be obvious to everybody, but I think like because of this freedom machine, and this is one of the points I wanted to get into, is that people who are just kind of living inside of this freedom machine framework, they become so detached from hard reality. And these hard realities are very important to just kind of knock you back in line and tell you what works and what doesn't work. So if you have like this safety net, and it's not just a safety net, but there's also an infrastructure that makes everything super easy and available, and you don't have to deal with healthcare costs in terms of taking care of your own health, good educational choices, taking care of your parents, even to the point where you're so detached from it that even the concept of death itself becomes like this entirely abstracted thing that's not even present. And that's one of the things that I've been thinking about, how like death just has no place in this society.
No, it doesn't, and that's part of why these past 2 years have been very interesting, because you have to be confronted with it, and the ways it has driven people like actually insane is incredible. And I have to have like many real life conversations where I have to like tell people that straight up, like, you're afraid of dying to this. I am not afraid of dying. I have made my peace, in a sense. If it's my time, then so be it, but I'm not going to sacrifice everything that's good just because some people are going to be affected by an illness,
some unspecified condition. That's yeah, but it is something we try to avoid talking too much about it. But now we're like an hour and a half in, so I think
where the good stuff starts.
That's where you can start putting in some of the more interesting stuff. I mean, this is a sort of strategy that it does actually work. I think Academic Agent talks about that. He when he started his channel, he wanted to make something that was so boring that all of these kind of guys like Kevin Logan and these kind of rabid feminist rebutters, these debunkers, would just turn off the video because they wouldn't bother listening to.
Well, sure, but I mean, at this point, it's all just bots, isn't it? Like, if I say a naughty word on YouTube, it's just going to be like flagged by something, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. But there are also the like, you have these kind of rabid people who seem to be just everywhere and watching everything, and
like terminally online people trying to get to. Yeah,
there is a human element to this as well. I have a hard time thinking that it's just pure machine intelligence.
No, I was thinking it like flags like, oh, something happened at the 1 hour 30 mark, and you have to go look, like, then they send in a human to like look at it.
I see. But just to get back to the unspecified condition that's been going on, I mean, they've been putting these articles in the Norwegian media that I just have such a hard time imagining that such a large part of the population are reading this stuff and not asking, like, they're not asking any questions, and they don't think any of it is weird, because there's so many assumptions and so many ideas presented in there that is just, well, excuse me, what planet are we living on now? An
Yeah, where
example
did you
would
get this
be,
from?
yeah, would be like this case where you had a man who was then had a medicine. He had taken the medicine 3 times, and he was 98. And he had, he took the medicine 3 times. He was 98 years old, and then was exposed to health personnel, because he had to have that some sort of person to help him in his whole house because he's 98, and that health personnel had not been they'd not taken the medicine. And this was just a giant thing that they made us think about, that, oh, well, these people, it's like the most irresponsible thing, because he died from it. Like, he contracted the condition, he died from it, and then and his family just went out, and it was sold in as like this giant tragedy, where, oh, well, he had, so many good years left in him, he was so healthy, and he
At
was 98.
98.
He was 98. The life expectancy for a male in Norway is 81.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's way beyond the life expectancy
So
for a
he's
man.
17 years above the life expectancy. I think he's had a pretty good run, and he contracts some sort of condition.
And
This
that's
is not
not
like
trying to
some.
be like for anyone who's like taking this the wrong way. We just want to be very clear. It's not like we're not being callous about this, but that's the traditional mode of thinking, because that's way of life. Death is a part of life, and in a society that respects that, you won't have this problem.
Yes.
Essentially, go to graveyards more often and think about death. To all of you listening, no,
It's
I'm
like
serious. Like, that's gonna help if you struggle with this.
Wingle
Like, go
says that he had so much to look forward to. Yeah, had so many shows on Netflix that were going to premiere.
go visit your like grandpa's grave or something, and just think about it for a moment, and it'll help you have a larger perspective.
Yes. But that is like, okay, everybody's just going along with it, and you can see people in the comment section were getting angry, and they were getting riled up, but somebody has to do something. This is irresponsible. We have to like lock up these people who are refusing to use the medication. But well, the assumption here is that, well, you have a right to live like over 100 years. I mean, I just try to like press these people a little bit, like, well, how long do you think people should live? How long do you think
Yeah,
people should live? Like 120? Is that fair?
what's the yeah, that's, you're since you're a creature of quantity, tell me how many years are sufficiently fulfilling.
Yeah, so that's just a part of the discussion now. But yeah, I mean, we really should do the sort of media episode. We're gonna have to do some more prep on that. But
Yeah.
that's just been sort of shocking to me to watch like the total. I do feel like that's one of the biggest signs for me of the decline of society, is just looking at these mainstream newspapers and how just
Certainly.
completely vapid they are of any information, and how they're not even able to, like, they're basically propagandizing 24/7, but they're not even able to present a coherent narrative.
No, because
You
this
should.
thing is moving too fast, and I think the internet has been. I mean, that's what the entirety of the past like 5 years have been in terms of the culture war, is trying to lock down the
Yes.
internet, right? Um,
But they seem to just completely lack discipline. It's like they could have just been holding back a little bit, but they seem to go in like full panic mode. It's like just DEFCON 3 on every single thing. Like around December, you would see them writing these articles about people who who hadn't been taking their medicine, how they should just be locked up, and that society is being held hostage by these, like 5%, like 10% of people.
Right.
who haven't taken their medication, and that, we need to have this discussion. This is a very serious discussion. We have to have this discussion and talk about what are we going to do with these people. We have to punish them. They have to suffer. We can't let the collective suffer because of these selfish people and their stupid ideas of freedom. And now they're basically, well, this last variant wasn't very dangerous, so everybody should just go get infected, and we're just going to open up everything. And this is like within a couple of weeks of each other. And I can't count how many like 180s they've done. It's just like a spinning ball of narratives that they can't even keep
Yeah,
straight, to the
it's
point where the normies can't even keep up with it.
no, and it like twists everything, and that's it turns just into like this it's a religious fervor in a sense, which I think is a very human thing. I'm reminded of like a video that made the rounds on Twitter that I saw with this is an American video, which I hate to bring up because it just, it taints everything. But it's a funny video nonetheless, of like this guy in an elevator getting harassed by two older ladies. Did you see this?
No.
They're both wearing masks, and they have they're both wearing masks. They're pointing their phones at him. He's like filming them, and they're like harassing him for not having a mask on. And he talks like he says something about he has natural immunity, etc. And you can hear on his voice that this guy is black, right? And like one of the women at some point hits him, just like gives him a
Oh,
whack,
boy.
and then they start screaming "Black Lives Matter" at him.
No,
no reason. Because he's not wearing a mask.
Well, are these women white?
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
And it's just this like weird glitch in the Matrix moment of this like, and of course you can see it in their eyes every time like a video of these like insane women who are like way too into like mask mandates. You can see it in their eyes. They have the like witch burning fervor, right? It's very strange.
But I think it's a very natural human impulse. I mean, this stuff
Oh,
feels
yes.
good for people. It feels really good to be able to point at bad people and just put them in their place. Being able to discipline people, because it is an element that is very. It's not in the modern society at all. Like good ways that you can get, like you can get the air out of your system, in terms of like the righteous indignation that's building up, and with everything that's happening in the world. So it's this the last 2 years have made the sort of the us versus them, or the friend enemy distinction very clearly. You can just look at people who is wearing the mask. I mean, who has the pass, who has taken the medication and so on. But
Yeah,
I mean,
hopefully it
they
doesn't
were.
get that bad over here. We'll see.
I think it does vary depending on where in the country you are.
Yeah,
Some places it's a bit more fanatical, other places it's not. I don't know if there's anyone in the comments who live in places where people are have just been hysterical in the last 2 years. I imagine maybe in Oslo and some of these more densely populated areas.
right. That makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, just to finish up on, like you said, like they were, they're the problem then with these spinning narratives is that they've been told a narrative about the foreigner and the humanitarian aid, helping the outsider, and like the racial justice, the awareness around it, and the inclusion in society, and that's been imprinted in them for years. And now this new narrative comes in with the mask and the medicine and everything, and where you're supposed to then love the people who use the mask and you hate the people who don't use the mask. But a lot of the people who were in the sort of previously protected group are overrepresented in not taking the medication. They're overrepresented in not using the mask, and so it is like, okay, how are they
yes,
gonna square this one? How are they gonna
I don't think
shuffle
they
this sort of
have to.
progressive
They're
deck?
just going to ignore it. I think, the progressive stack is, to me, a dead concept. Like it's just gonna absorb everything, and if you notice a discrepancy, you're a Nazi. Oh, that's a bad word, but we're past 1:30, so let's see if you're.
You can use the. No, it is true that, but they can't. Yeah, they can't just. It just comes down to, are you obedient to the regime or not?
Yeah. Yes.
And that's it. I mean, are you willing to just do all the stupid stuff that they tell you to do? Are you willing to just accept every narrative?
Right.
And there's a very sort of filtering mechanism there between the people who are just willing to go along with it and the people who aren't. Of course, in the Norwegian freedom machine, they still have great support. Just to tie it back to the topic of the stream here, is that there's a lot of trust in the Norwegian society, and it's interesting because they've somehow liberalized it to a point where everybody has just become these kind of super individuals who want to be independent of each other. But they're all supposed to be independent, but they also have all this kind of trust to this machine that grants them their independence. So it is almost like the perfect mechanism for subversion.
Yes, it's what is it referred to? The Norwegian gold, the high trust that exists in our society, not only towards each other, but the state as well. And it's a weird, like when I think about, if you like take a moment to think about the cultural, historical, Norwegian man, so to speak. I covered this a bit in the Hamsun stream I did. It is certainly a very individualistic figure. In the sense that a lot of people in Norway do value their privacy, do value, ostensibly owning their own land, etc. I mean, homesteading is pretty much a national pastime, right?
Yes. And I mean, it is something to be grateful for. We're sitting here and complaining, so yeah, just a minute of gratitude that people are actually homesteading in Norway, and we're living a place where people are taking care of their houses, because that's not a given.
I joke about it, but I could probably like leave my house unlocked for a week and it wouldn't be a problem, right?
Yes.
Don't dox me. I'm gonna start locking my house now.
Famous
But
last words.
as a thought experiment, because I mean, there's just nothing, and at times you'll get these like suspicious Polish vans rolling around, but they'll be dealt with pretty quickly.
Yeah, they are dealt with, actually. I mean, one doesn't encounter the Norwegian police that much, but if we get back to what we talked about in the first stream about some of these fringe parties and people who get too fringe in this society, they are dealt with in quiet.
Yeah.
Very effectively.
Yes.
I just remembered at one point in my life where I had a car. I won't say the model, but it is sort of an older model car, and this car was like of the same brand that a lot of these Polish gangs would have. And I remember just being pulled over constantly, and then just having police like they would just come out of nowhere and stop me and just check if I had something illegal in the trunk and so forth. And this all stopped once I got a more sort of middle class car.
Yeah, they're very
And
good at profiling. I'll give them that. They have received some flack for it, but it's one of those things where they receive flack for it and then they just don't do anything about it because they know it works.
It works.
Okay, I'm thinking I'm going to go get some water, and I need to get some batteries for something because I can't shut off the stream if I don't.
That's fine. I don't know if I can bring up comments, or maybe I can.
Well, I was thinking if the viewers have anything they want to ask us, they can just post that now, and we'll deal with it as we go on. Or you can start answering them as they flood in. That's up to you. I'll just be gone for a couple of minutes.
Just try to interact a little bit here. So
yes, batteries for my water. Yes, no, I need batteries for my computer mouse, and I need water for my body.
That sounds correct. So I did see in the chat here, I didn't want to interrupt the string we were on, but with the Mongolian Doggerland, who mentioned that the Prudentialist actually recommended this stream. Is this true? Let's see. That would have been cool. I need to at least watch the stream. I'm kind of a fan, so it's cool if he likes this show. Let's see. Yeah, that's correct. It's not that difficult in Norway to look up people's information. Damn. Is that true? Wow. Yeah, I mean, it is privacy, at least in the kind of aesthetic sense. In Norway, you have the large houses with rooms, so at least you'll have a private room, and you can feel like you're not being watched by a physical person, but the electric eye is there, definitely. Yeah, the phone is probably listening. The Chinese are listening in on that. I mean, the information is also very accessible. You could look, yeah, the phone IDs. I'm actually quite paranoid about. I mean, for those of you who don't have it, I recommend getting a burner phone or 2 burner phones. I mean, they're of course traceable back to you as well, but let's see here. Wingle says, I talked to 2 Norwegian girls who said they would rather adopt African kids than have children of their own. One of them later came on to me for my base takes on, but no go. The African baby thing was just a shit test, Wingle. So I don't know. You get a lot of this stupid shit from Norwegian women, but I think for most of them this is not the case. And you see it in the sort of dating statistics as well. That generally, like, white women are not that interested in dating outside of their race, unless they get some very specific, very very specifically good offer.
I'm back.
Yep.
Is this just Norwegian women or in general?
No, it's Wingle who made a comment there about he talked to some Norwegian girls who wanted to adopt African babies rather than have their own children. I don't know which is better. I think you could put the Norwegian women in a trap by talking about carbon footprint. I like to pull that one when people talk about immigration.
Then again, like talking to women, unless they're your wife.
No, but I mean, it is fun sometimes to talk about like the carbon, the carbon footprint of immigrants or stuff like that.
Sure, yeah.
But you do see that in like the women who are really. It's very sad because I do think liberal societies are a bit like Saturn. Can you pull that up, Walrus? Like the picture of Saturn eating his children.
The Goya painting.
Yep.
That's one of my favorite paintings, actually. Like it's one. Like I obviously won't have it hanging on my wall, but it's one of my favorite paintings, like in general, because it's one of those that keeps you honest. It reminds you not to. Well, it reminds you of a lot of things, I think. But for example, it reminds you not to eat your children. It reminds you not to.
No, but it is
in a spiritual or metaphysical sense, of course, not literally, but also literally, don't eat your kids. Obviously,
no go.
Let's see here. Sharing and Saturn devouring his son.
So this is what I think about when I think about particularly like liberal women, or I'm using liberal in like the loose term where I'm actually talking about progressive people. Because the progressive system or the liberal system tends to just eat its own children. The biggest losers in the progressive system are the people who are the most progressive. I don't know if you ever thought about that, Walrus.
that they're the white the liberals are the only one who has the outgroup preference.
Yes, the
And
outgroup
and
preference.
yep.
And the narrative is just so stacked against them, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
just the outgroup preference, but the climate thing, where they'll, I've heard this from like the, Norwegian women who are like really on the ball with the sort of climate stuff, is that you don't want to have kids because it's a high carbon footprint.
Yes.
So the people who are the most obedient to the system are going to have their genetics destroyed. That's what's happening. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
they're basically, they're doing what they've been told. They're following the hierarchy up towards higher status, but that means just being eaten by Saturn in this
Right.
society. So you basically get rewarded for being disagreeable and just being reactionary, or just being very anti the system. At least in the long
It's
term. I mean, in the short term, you have to deal with the social pain and a lot of the
yes, of
peer
course.
pressure. But
Yeah, it's I don't know, man. It's it's a one-way ticket. I don't like it. But it's one of those things where, in my experience at least, if you are a right-wing man with a right-wing values, you're going to pull them in your direction over time anyway.
oh
And
yeah,
if you don't, they're not worth keeping around anyway.
no,
So
just don't. I mean, just don't play the villain too much. I guess it's in my experience. I mean, if you're doing this kind of like wignat thing, it's going to become difficult. But if you can keep it a little bit on the down low and just progressively
yes,
introduce it, it's quite. It's actually very effective.
of course. While we're on paintings, I might actually, did I show this at some point, or should I save this for the or a thumbnail? This is from the Mausoleum of Emanuel Vigeland,
Wow.
who is the brother of the artist who did the in Oslo. There's the large, is it the obelisk?
Hmm.
It's like a tourist destination. It's a whole park, and there's like this obelisk full of like people. Hang on, I've been there. Come on. Where's the photo? Here we go. So his brother Emanuel had his own studio in Oslo, and he decided that when he died, he was going to convert it to a mausoleum. So he painted, this is like an old brick building that he painted the entire insides of with like religious Christian imagery, and in like the old traditional sense. And he closed up all the windows and intended for himself to be buried there when he died,
Wow.
which I
That's
think
cool.
is
I
it's
really
very
like this
pretty,
stuff. I mean, we're
and
getting to
it's incredibly based.
yeah, the deliberalization. This is very deliberalizing. I think just looking at these things,
Yes,
it takes you out of the numbers frame, just to round it back a bit, because
it does.
I mean, when you the more you think about it, everything in our society is so determined by this kind of spreadsheet thinking. Even the architecture and the way things are planned out, because I mean, you could just look at these older buildings that are stuff like this, or you could look at a cathedral, a castle, or just like a sort of townhouse, something from another age, where they, you ask yourself the question, like, why did they build this in the first place? Because people today would never build something like that. If something is being
Yes,
built today, it's basically, okay, there's going to be a sort of hell of sending in applications, getting everything approved by the bureaucracy. Why are they doing it? Well, it's both, two numerical reasons. Like, you have some property investor who wants to make a 10% yield over time, who's borrowed some money, and then from the consumer side, you have all of these bug men that you're trying to fit as many bug men into squares as you can, as long as they have, the basic utilities of running water, electricity, and an internet connection where they can stream
yes,
porn on. So that is sort of, okay, that's the reason that you're building a building now, and you see these sort of ugly kind of square, these sort of aluminium glass. I mean, they look like spreadsheets. They are just kind of like grids, as Morgoth talks about, and that's the only thing that can be built from this kind of spreadsheet mathematical mindset.
Yes. It's certainly, it's the reign of quantity. That's what it is. And it's very interesting because after having read that book, I just keep spotting it over and over, and it's annoying in that way. Let's look at some comments while we have this nice painting up. Nordanon says he painted that in a total manic state and never intended it for it to be seen. I think he's probably talking about the Saturn Devouring His Son by Francisco
painting,
Goya, because it's part of his black painting series, which is paintings he made towards the end of his life in a manic state, or when he was in and out of mania. And he painted most of these paintings in his mansion on the walls, if I remember correctly. So they weren't found until like after he died, and people went in to like clean it up, and they found a bunch of like these disturbing paintings who are like, to me, many of them are like hauntingly beautiful because they like touch on a lot of like human truth in like a deep sense, and they're supposed to be unnerving. That's the point, right?
Yes, it's very metal for those. Assume that's a very Norwegian thing as well. Maybe we should do a stream on. I think I mentioned it to you at some point that we should do like a Vikernes Deepest Door or something.
Yeah.
But it is one of the few Norwegian exports, and I think there's some overlap between, in heavy metal and reactionary thinking, although there's a lot of pause.
Sure, but you find both, right? It's a strange mix. You find all kinds of ideologies in black metal. J Green River says, what would be the best recipes for kids, though, just in case we're in a decline and the gas stop from Russia? I'm not sure if that's asking someone else or if it's asking us. I might have forgotten what this is in relation to.
You mean like trying to increase the birth rates, or
I don't know. We'll see if he adds to this.
You can clarify.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Maybe the people at the top are really on our side, and they set all this up to accelerate societal natural selection. Dare to dream. Yeah. Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything.
I mean, I do think on some level, like on some very kind of thin, abstract level, there is a grain of truth in this. When you look at some of the elites that we have currently, I do think they have a kind of social Darwinist look at society. Like people like William Fence and the Hungarian finance man, and I mean, even in Norway, people like Petter Stordalen, these people who have made themselves billionaires within one generation. I imagine a lot of them just have that attitude that you can sink or swim, and the rest of you can just have UBI and your little shitty porn on your internet connection. But I mean, if you want to make it, you really have to just beat all the challenges and rise above.
Oh, a Green River. I don't think I can say this on stream, but he wants to. He's literal. If you look at the chat, he's quite literal.
All right.
In saying recipe for kids.
Recipe for kids. No, I just do the Norwegian taco spices.
Yeah. Oh God. Well, yeah, that covers everything. Like it's just gonna taste. It's just gonna taste salt and cumin anyway. So,
Lucky Pants.
Is that the English word for that spice? Can I say that? Okay, whatever. We're past the 150. 130. I'm gonna assume that's the magic number. Lucky Pants says, "Can we revert feminism? Is it possible?"
I mean, I do. What I do actually like about this modern woke regime is that it's pushing white women out of the stack. I don't know if you thought about that, Walrus, but
I have. But I'll say that you can never go back And the only way forward is through, in whatever, configuration you end up at the other side. So my answer is no, you cannot revert feminism, but you can get to a state where you can, where you don't need it anymore.
Post-feminism.
Maybe, I don't know. Or, societal collapse, I guess.
Yeah. But like Green River said last time, I mean, that's kind of a utopia as well.
Sure,
But
sure.
I think we were coming to the point where like feminism is becoming a little bit less relevant, and it's not like because the elites are getting smarter about this or they don't want feminism. It's just that with the bio-Leninism, they have to keep putting new people into the machine who are going to fight
it's not
for
sustainable.
No, I mean it's been women with feminism. It's like they give women rights and then they put women in the machine to fight for those rights. But when that's been established for a while, they have to find new people who are less comfortable. So that's why they're going with like the LGBTQ crowd and the trans crowd. It's like they have to give those people rights so they can come in and fight in the machine.
Yes.
And they push the old guard out, which is like the women. I think that's what you're seeing with these sort of trans athletes, and it is like the new, the new defenders.
You can revert feminism in the sense that, let's say, you change the government, right? You change the nature of the state as it exists now, because without it, feminism couldn't exist, and it wouldn't be a reversion; it would just be a destruction, and that's a better way of putting it. Like, we can't go back to before, but we can destroy its current incarnation and then build something new.
And I don't think that it would even be that difficult. I mean, it's just like Green Rivers mentioned, it's just a question of having power. I mean, imagine that, say, we control the media, right? Or we controlled all media and we control the laws. Then we could just start, sending out this kind of wholesome, family-oriented entertainment. And every Netflix show was like this romance-type show, or it was about families.
Yeah, and do the opposite of what's been happening. Well,
the image, image that is sort of sold to women is that this is good. Like, it's good to be a housewife, or it's good to be a mother, and so on. And I think that they would just, jump on that the same way they jump on these sort of Netflix ideas.
And bring back my favorite pro-natalist policy from the 20th century, which is to give tax breaks for every children, and when you get 3, you get an additional tax break, because then you're adding, which was part of the mid-century German platform, if I remember correctly.
I do think I
mean, say what you want, but at least that sounds like a good idea. If you want people to have kids, give them tax breaks. I mean, it's that simple, which is why I hate. I'm sorry, I'm gonna derail this for a second, which is why I hate like the modern neoliberal managerialism, because it overcomplicates everything. Like, at a certain point, just giving people money, like straight up just putting money in their bank account, is simpler than whatever the fuck you're doing, in a sense, right? Which is why we have the whole UBI thing going, because that's actually preferable to whatever fuckery we have now to some people.
It is overcomplicated, and I mean, with some people, you don't even need to put money in their bank. You can just stop taking it out of there.
Well, yes, but I mean, if you're going to do the thing, at least just do the thing and don't overcomplicate it, right? That's my point.
Yep.
Okay. That is the room in Norway that has the longest echo and delay. It sounds awesome. Extends sounds 8 times, I think. Vigeland was inspired by the Renaissance Italians. Have to love that. He spent about 20 years constructing his own gravesite. His ashes are in a stone egg above the door. That's true. When you go in, you have to pass under his ashes. Scandinavian minimalism is just depressing to me. IKEA furniture is peak Bergman. To some extent, I agree, but that's also the Swedes' fault. I'm just going to let them take the L on that.
The eternal Swede. We got
the eternal Swede, yes.
I mean, it's too bad we don't have any Swedes, as far as I know, in this fair. It would be nice to have one on.
Yeah, I've been looking into getting some Swedes. If you're a Swede and you're interested, let me know in the Matrix chat. We're always looking for new friends who are willing to provide perspectives on these shows. So
So
I
the
have one
Leo
guy from
Borealis is
Finland waiting, but if there's any other Finnish people out there, there's still a lot of potential.
so you got Leo Borealis reacting in the chat here. I think he's Swedish.
I know. I've
Yeah.
been talking a bit to him. Well, Leo, you should you existed. You're in the Matrix, but you haven't talked to me about wanting to join this, have you? Oh, sorry. No, I'm mistaking you for someone else. Yeah, we have one Swede, but I'd like more. Sorry.
Yep.
I've been talking to a lot of people the past 2 weeks about these. A lot of the I need more Finnish people. That was my point. If there's any Finns listening to this and you'd like to contribute, there we go. Please do so. It's getting late here and my mind is getting boggled.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we can keep going for maybe another 10 minutes
Yeah.
questions, and then we could round off and get a good night's sleep.
Let's see. At Walrus, Norwegian alt media documentary set useful or boomer MAGA cringe. I'm in the boomer MAGA cringe camp, but I haven't looked thoroughly at it because I looked at it for like 5 minutes and then I figured nah, this is boomer stuff.
I reset. I haven't paid that much attention to. I heard there was some sort of internal drama going on there. But I mean, document this. It is this very kind of boomer counter jihad articles, and I mean, I go in to laugh at that sometimes. They always have these sort of, it's the same boomer take.
And when I was in there, it was a lot of like China stuff. It's
well, the Islamists, and they're letting the Muslims do this, and they're letting the Muslims. Why are we doing this? And they're very close, I feel, and it is kind of, they are consistent. They do deliver news, and they will cover news there that you're not going to see other places, and it's decently written.
as counter signaling, sure, I guess, but
I mean, for me, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be perfect, but yeah, it's a tad too much of this kind of counter jihad boomer energy to it. But at the same time, I think it does more good than harm.
Yeah, that's fair.
Steigon is also really good, actually.
Yeah,
if you're reading that
true.
one. I mean, but he's just like this kind of old commie guy anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say that's just like a one-man band, basically.
Yeah, but he is just like this sort of actually criticizing power type guy, and that's useful. Just I mean, I'd like to see more of that in the media, where he's just sort of principally just, okay, I'm just going to criticize power.
Sure.
And he will, name certain names. He will talk about Larry Fink and BlackRock and who owns what, and that's not coming from this right-wing perspective.
No, it's from like a communist perspective, which I always find incredibly dull, because it always leads back to the same, like, I don't know, like eat the rich, like result attitude.
Yeah.
Which is like, it's good that he's doing it. I just know, like, the times I've read it, I know, like, point for point what he's going to hit on, right? It's very predictable, I guess.
Yes.
And maybe that's.
I think he writes in a good way, and he does point to a lot of the right things. So very happy to have him there. But like you said, it's not really what we want. But you have some of these, like Adam Curtis, and a lot of these, or some of these lefties, so these kind of old school lefties, where their narratives just intersect so much with ours.
Especially on the critique, I don't doubt that when it comes to the critique of the modern world, meaning probably everything post the French Revolution, you'll find a lot of early. I'm talking very early, but in general, like right wing and left wing critique of the world is very much the same a lot of the time, just from a different set of values.
Yes. And they're attacking the same targets.
They're attacking the same target, and then they end up at two different places. So let's see. Acting is a bit degenerate. those actors kissing and shit while being in character. It's kind of like the softest. What are you talking about, Julius? Oh, sorry. I think I think I skipped something. Do you think it's a problem that despite the machine moving on, women, even in our spaces, are thoroughly infected with the egalitarian mythology? Well, yes and no. The problem isn't necessarily egalitarian or equality thinking, because it's, well, it is a problem, but it's more about getting to a state where that doesn't matter, because that is the traditional state.
Yes.
The traditional state of a husband-wife relationship is not to be equal. It is, here's a bunch of work that needs to be done. How are we going to allocate this? To, like, in a practical sense, that's how this all came about, because, you know, we have to survive. So egalitarian thinking is just a byproduct of the entire system, really.
When he writes egalitarian mythology, I wonder if he's talking about this sort of like pagan feminism or these
Maybe.
ideas that I see within a lot of these. You know, we talk about the like Norwegian truth regime or the Norwegian boomer truth regime. The like you have this kind of anti-Christianism in there, with the
Yes.
assumption that, you know, like the pagan beliefs of the Vikings were like implicitly feminist, which is such a
But that's
dumb
the same
fucking
thing. It's
thing. Like
not about, you know, it's not about like women's rights or anything. It's about the fact that if we don't like do these things, we're gonna die of starvation and frostbite. You know,
yeah,
like you're gonna go have the kids. I'm gonna go get, you know, fur for to make sure they don't freeze to death.
yeah,
And
that
then,
stuff.
you know, it's,
Feminism doesn't come in there. It
yeah,
doesn't. It doesn't even
yeah,
enter
it
the
doesn't even
mind.
enter
So
the conversation. It's not even close. It's just about living together and being a team. And yeah, sure, in that sense, you're quote unquote equal, right? Like a man and a woman in a marriage is a unit, and in that sense, they're equal. But it's about the union. It's not about both of them being on the same level of playing field. It's about two becoming one.
yeah,
And that's totally different.
and there's no freedom machine there to help you. So you're
Right.
running up against hard
There's
limits
no
all the time.
there's no, I am going to say that is a bot. Block that user. Let's see. Okay, let's go. Can we, in addition to the tax breaks for families, nationalize the banks and ban porn and sex work? I mean, yes.
Yeah, that's a good start. So, I mean, from like my perspective,
I mean, we already have nationalized banks to a large extent. So,
yeah, we need to just get someone else to control them. But
sure.
I mean, with this stuff, it's I think especially with the pornography stuff, for me, it would have to just, you know, like you just make it less accessible. Or you try to just put it back into, you know, where it was, maybe in like you go into the 60s or something, where you'd have like this porn shop that would just be in day. It's only open in daylight, so you have to just walk in there, and everybody sees you walking in there, and you have to walk out like a physical copy of this stuff, you know. I think that would, yeah, I would like to see that.
Yeah.
So I think it would be difficult if you go in like this sort of complete ban mode. And I'm not saying this as some sort of liberal, but it's difficult to get societies where you like completely eradicate a lot of these impulses. It's hard to do that without the machete death squads. So
yes, it's a tricky question, certainly.
yeah, it
The
just needs
commies
to be
have one
restricted.
analysis, and it always ends up at the same place, says Leo Borealis. That's very true. There aren't many Finns who wander into this in this direction. The connection to the mid-century German and imitation of that in the most low IQ way is common. Okay, I see. So that's probably why there's not a lot of.
Are you saying that there's a lot of Wignats in Finland, or are they
I
scared?
think
They're scared away from this idea
they're
because of
either
the
scared
connection.
away or they're like they seem to be like almost yeah, I guess Wignats or like imitations or hyperbolic, I guess.
Yeah.
neo mid-century Germans in that like camp way that they get.
But we're getting away from that. I mean,
Yeah,
if there's anything I'm positive about in the future, is that, I mean, just looking at the sort of sphere that's starting to assemble online now, you have people that are intelligent and well spoken, and a lot of them are good looking as well. And I hope that's going to attract more of the same types of people into
sure.
this sphere.
Yeah,
And that's not saying that, oh, we're gonna cuck and we're gonna be like moderate or whatever, but to get away from this kind of like American History X type aesthetic is quite
yeah.
necessary. Yeah.
It's that old is a clear pill moldbug idea of like inhabiting the frame. Like your enemy hands you a caricature of their like ideal enemy, and then you decide to become that just to spite them, and then you wonder why you can't win. You know,
Yeah.
instead of actually thinking for yourself. Let's see.
Redacting see Nordan on what if we redacted pornographers. Yeah, I think we could do that. That's probably a better solution.
I mean, you can probably just do both, but yeah, it's it's the same solution either way, I think. In Rome, actors were not electable to become tribune of the plebeians for the reason that all actors are also whores, and their craft is built on lies and deception. Right, that is something I've encountered, and that I keep reminding myself and the people I know, that you should never trust an actor, because their life is like their profession is lying. You can appreciate their art form, but you should never trust them.
No, and I think that's a good rule of thumb. And I feel like a part of the boomer mythos or the liberal mythos that I've had to deprogram is the kind of relating to actors and
Yeah,
having like
the
these
Oscar
actors as
worship.
Oscar worship. Oh, this guy. Oh, I love Tom Hardy. I love all of his films. I love Tom Hanks.
I
Just
think
get
it's
out of that
like it gets
mindset.
it's a bit of the online sort of young man jokerism of, wow, he's literally me, turning into like you're worshiping the actual actor as well. I think it's something you grow
Yeah.
out of almost.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, you still see some of these movie bobs floating around, but
Sure.
you know, I, there's time and there's diabetes, so I hope that's going to deal with the problem.
Yeah. The Finnish TV series Unknown Soldier asks Tuntematon how do you say that? Tuntematon Sotilas from 2017 is excellent. No excuses made for being allied with the Germans, just a straight up portrayal of the continuation war. That's interesting. Yeah, I meant the mythology and the more boomer truth sense of the implanted hatred of homemaking. I see what you're saying in the idea of just stepping over the issue entirely post-collapse. Thanks. You're welcome, JP Morris. Just be normal, says Nordanon, probably on the topic of
The women question.
the
Yeah.
no, I'm thinking he's talking about the optics of
All right. Yeah.
dangerous ideas.
And then
Journalists and
you
worse than
have to
actors, says
think of
sorry.
yourself as a good guy, almost like
Right.
that's what you have to, not as a misunderstood. Like you are genuinely trying to do the best thing here. You're not just trying to
Sure.
get revenge on the system or something. Like you're actually trying to save society.
And I'll just say that, if there's more than enough right-wing critique of the mid-century Germans for you to adopt their answer to the question that both or sort of the response to the modernity question that both the right and the Marxists are trying to combat. And there's, as I said, there's a lot of right-wing critique of how they did it. You don't have to adopt that wholesale, right?
No.
You have to break out of the idea that you can either choose, you can either choose to be a centrist or a mid-century German or a communist. There's a to use a phrase, there's a third position here.
Oh yeah, no, I want the big tent. I just want a different big tent. It's sort of
Yes,
I don't want the sort of LGBTQ
I would like
conservative
one
big
without
tent.
the
You know,
rainbow
yeah,
colors. Yes.
no rainbows in the tent.
Asian pride, Suomi wide, says Mongolian Doggerland. Journalists are worse than actors. I had that on the stream. Did you see Tom Hanks thing recently? Is this about the Tom Hanks speaking for the Biden administration, which is
Yeah,
like
they
peak?
did a sort of like 1 year of the Biden regime. Not
That's the
regime,
State
but
of the
one.
Union
Yeah,
thing, isn't it? Doesn't every president do this?
no. I mean, it was sort of a commercial,
Oh,
more of
okay.
oh well, we've been through all of this stuff. You know, America's the home of the brave, and we can build ourselves back up again, and we've had all this job
Did he say
growth.
build back
You know,
better?
no, he didn't. So I mean, he was. They were trying to sort of reach out more to the like boomer cons in that one.
I see.
But of course, it's not going to work.
Which is
It's
probably why they use Tom Hanks.
yeah.
Yeah. But again, don't trust actors.
No, I agree.
I'm reminded of like an old scene from The Simpsons. I don't remember the context, but they used Tom Hanks for like a government, some sort of government advertisement. And the joke is that Tom Hanks says something like, the US government has run out of all credibility, so they're borrowing some of mine, or something like that. And it's funny how, Simpsons keep predicting the future, is my point.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. But the Joker is literally me, says Norton.
The Joker is all of us. Right? But that's going back to like the enemy frame. You know, I feel like that's the jumping into the villain
you
role.
can meme about it, but yeah,
it is really funny. But it's sort of going. You're just sort of playing the caricature they've created for you.
I'm just too weak for like the memes part of this. Like it's so good how you can trigger people online with just this sort of thing at times. It's not very productive, but it's very funny.
Yeah, it is. It is super funny. I mean, it's that's the problem. That's the sort of the temptation. Is that you either you want to do it because it's like this gut angry reaction, or you want to do it because it's just fun.
Yes. Jack Ruby says The Simpsons doesn't predict the future. The trolls who run the media make it happen. Like if you dig into the Tom Hanks thing or the Q shaman or any of these supposed future predictions, and you'll find you know who. I'm not going to touch that, but thank you for the comment. Okay. I think things are slowing down.
Yes.
Might be a good time to very tired.
Yep.
It's been a long day.
But I thought it was a good stream.
Yeah, despite the slightly impromptu nature of it, I think I hope all of you watching had a good time. I hope we all learned a little bit. This is the thing I want to say, like after last stream we talked about like parasocial relationships. I know it's not going to help because every time I guess I'm going to go online, I'm going to inadvertently fool someone into actually thinking that I'm worth following. And I don't want that to happen really, because the whole point of all of this is to just, we're here to learn, and we're going to make mistakes and we're going to say stupid shit. But at the end of the day, it's, if we come out the other side a little bit, wiser, then that's the goal for me.
Yes, the first step is to remove the enemy's parasocial characters to put in our parasocial characters, and then we can just abolish the whole system.
Yes. Okay. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you for the next stream. In the future, we will probably move to a bi-weekly schedule for a bit, just to have some time for preparations and real life. But if you follow my socials, if you follow this channel, you will be notified of when my upcoming streams are. Remember to, if you hit the bell or whatever, you'll also get notified by when I do any streams or any videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.